Have I tried to hurt you? It isn't me you're afraid of. You understand me. What you're afraid of is the unknown. Don't be afraid.
But I am afraid.
The running's over. It's time to rest. Give me your hand.
But I don't want to die.
Trust me.
No. No.
Mother, give me your hand. You see? No shock. No engulfment. No tearing asunder. What you feared would come like an explosion is like a whisper. What you thought was the end, the beginning.
You are now listening to that Twilighty show about that zone. I'm Eve Kerrigan, and today we're going to discuss the third season episodes, Nothing in the Dark, and One More Pallbearer. Stay tuned.
Charles Robert Redford Jr., born August 18th, 1936. He's 80 years old this year. How about that?
I know, isn't that bananas? Like,
yeah.
Crazy. People just be getting old.
Yes, and some are just dropping before their time as well.
But
better known as Robert Redford, American actor, director, producer, businessman, environmentalist, and philanthropist. How do you pronounce that, Eve?
Philanthropist.
Oh, philanthropist. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know. I put too much emphasis on the phil.
Philanthropist.
Philanthropist sounds like somebody who prescribes drugs to you, or some kind of a prehistoric creature.
Something to do with the plants.
Yes, it's philanthropist. You put the "an."
Wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Syllable. So what I found interesting about Redford was that he wasn't your typical flashy actor. I mean, he's a good-looking guy, of course, but he was always very subdued, for lack of a better word, as an actor, a producer, and a director.
I agree with that. I think it's interesting to see him in this episode because first of all, he's not as young as you might think. You know, it's so early in his career, and yet you look at him and you think that's not the face of a boy. That's the face of a man.
He seems, he does seem mature beyond his years. I think it was 36. This was, 62, 61?
Right.
What does that make him?
Well,
makes him about 20, 26, something like that?
yeah, I mean, yes, 26, but that's exactly my point is you said that 36, and I thought, oh, yeah, he was a bit older than I would have even guessed.
Yeah.
You know, if you had told me he had done that episode, and you can see it's prior to anything that you really know him from. And it's just interesting because he has some lines in his face already at that point.
Yeah, he did. But he also had this kind of that 60s hair.
Yeah.
That you cannot really imitate in any other decade. It's all slicked back and everything.
It's like puppet hair.
What do you think are your favorite Robert Redford movies?
Well, I love The Natural.
Right, we talked about that. Baseball.
Yeah, we did. The Natural is amazing. I'm trying to even. Oh, and All the King's Men.
All the King's Men. That's a recent one, isn't it?
Well, no, from the am I misnaming it? The one based on the book about maybe I meant All the President's Men.
All the President's Men. There you go. Dustin Hoffman.
Yes.
He played Bob Woodward to Dustin
Yes,
Hoffman's Carl Bernstein.
Correct.
That's a movie I really enjoyed. I remember seeing that on cable a long time ago. I should probably do a write-up on that, I think. And actually, being a kid, I would see a couple of his movies in the theater, like Sneakers is a movie I really enjoyed.
I love Sneakers. That's a cute one.
With Sidney Poitier and Dan Aykroyd, David Strathairn, and River Phoenix, one of his last roles.
I know, how sad. And what's her name? That wonderful actress, Mary
McDonnell.
Mary McDonnell.
So Redford has this very all-American quality, and you just get the feeling that he's kind of playing himself. That's what I've always, because he's not flashy, and this is the point. I think he's subdued, and he doesn't really say, "Look at me, I'm an actor. I'm really talented. Give me an Oscar." And he got one for Ordinary People that he directed himself, I believe. Sure. And good movie, underrated, but in 1980.
Oh my God, Ordinary People's amazing. I love that movie. I forgot.
I was 7 years old, I think, when that movie came out. And I was like, what? I don't want to watch a domestic drama. Suddenly, I sound like Roseanne Barr. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch Timothy Hutton's brother drown and then blaming himself and try to kill himself. He's going to talk to the guy from Taxi.
Spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it.
Sorry. There were other films that were much better, such as Empire Strikes Back and Superman 2.
Yes, right. At that time, yes.
So here he plays Death.
Yeah.
And he does it in that same inimitable fashion. He's just a nice boy. You have Gladys Cooper playing a frightened old woman who's a lot smarter than she gives herself credit for. She suspects death is waiting for her at every turn, in every dark alley, on the other side of every door. And she's right.
She is right.
Yeah.
I liked her. I really thought she was so great in that episode and so convincing and, persuasively. I felt persuaded by her earnest about it all. Like, I really had a compassion for her, but I also felt frustrated by her sort of senseless clinging to life.
I don't know. I mean, like, if she's like a prey and death is the predator.
Yeah.
Or even at that age, anything is a predator. It's like one good slip and she'll, break her bones or something. She seems so very brittle in the episode that anything is going to hurt her.
I kept thinking as I was watching it, like, am I supposed to take away from this that we should just give in to death and, and just, let's not get too old and cling to things. Let's just cash it in.
Well, I think if we give death a character, if we give death a job and a personality, and it's been done, then you have to assume they do their paperwork, they do their bookkeeping, and they decide it's time for you. Well, we'll get to that in a second. I do want to say that this episode is one of my personal favorites. Mm-hmm. It's an episode I first. It was like one of the first ones I think I saw when, because I don't think I saw the show until we came up to New York and they played it on Channel 11, and this was an episode that had me like riveted watching it. And also, there's kind of a novelty to seeing like somebody like Robert Redford play this part.
Right.
Now, what's sad about this is that there are people, shut-ins like her, who aren't waiting for death. They're just scared. On my block, my neighbors lock their doors while children play outside, A lot of gun owners I know who try to convince themselves they're just upholding their Second Amendment rights are in reality just incredibly frightened little people. That's how I see it. I'm not getting into a debate here. I'm just saying.
No, I'm there with you, yeah.
There are a lot more frightened people out there than happy, content people, and that's just a fact. So Gladys sits vigil, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She hears a scuffle outside her dilapidated basement apartment and then a gunshot. Next thing you know, there's an injured young police officer at her door begging to be let in. He collapses, and she takes him inside. She gives him tea. She puts a blanket on him, and they talk about her fear of death. And, she claims that she can normally identify death. Saw him on a bus the other day, as a matter of fact. And Redford eyes her like she's a bit around the bend, actually. He's sort of playing the part. He's playing the part of a normal guy. Oh, that's a little bit nuts. Maybe I should get out of here because I'm picking up a Kathy Bates vibe from you.
Is he, or is he deaf going, wow, she's been seeing me around? That's why this one's been so hard to get.
He probably, in his head, he's probably thinking, she is sharp.
That's a surprise,
I couldn't take a chance and let him in. Don't you see? He might be him.
Him?
Mr. Death. I know he's out there. He's trying to get in. He comes to the door and knocks. He begs me to let him in. Last week he said he came from the gas company. Oh, he's clever. After that he claimed to be a contractor hired by the city. I knew who he was. He said this building was condemned, that I'd have to leave. I kept the door locked. And he went away. He knows I'm onto him.
Mr. Death. Is this a person? Like you or me?
I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. I know it's true.
But he's trying to do this thing like, you just sound like a paranoid nut, okay? Not everyone's trying to kill you, even though I actually am. So, but I don't get that he has a bullet wound. He's probably bleeding out for all we know. But never mind that. He's playing amateur psychologist to assuage her fears for the most part. That's his job. He uses tough love on her. Mm-hmm. So what's the point of living? What's the point of running from death if you're just going to hide in a condemned building?
Well, I do think that's the takeaway, right? Is that hiding is no kind of life anyway.
Yeah,
things that we're often afraid of, well, they even say it at the end, right? There's nothing in the dark that wasn't there in the light.
But death is kind of, I think that death is kind of like hiding. If you're hiding in this place and you're not going to go out.
Oh, after it happens, but I plead ignorance on that one. I wouldn't have a clue what death is like.
Death, I would assume. Geez, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. I've thought about it for years, actually. I think there's something else. I think there's something else after death, because I think we continue in this straight timeline. Because we have time. You know how we measure time? It's like earlier today it was 4:00 p.m., right? Now it's a little after 11. So we measure time in a conscious life. How do you go from conscious to unconscious? All I know is that when you go to bed and you go to sleep, and you actually go to sleep, it doesn't seem like time passes. It's like the next minute you're up.
Well, right, because time doesn't really, the idea that time doesn't really exist and that we create it as a construct because it's it's just how we organize our existence. So I don't know.
Perhaps we can organize our non-existence as well.
Yeah, perhaps so. I mean, I don't know. I actually think possibly, you die and there is no linear time construct that you follow, but that you can jump around. So like the idea, if there is no time, right, that I could die, and if I were to be reincarnated, if you believe in that, then there's no saying that I have to be reincarnated in the future. From now, I could be reincarnated into the past.
Is it possible? I mean, like, if you want to get into that.
Excuse me. That doesn't interfere with my timeline.
Is it possible? Have you ever felt like you had some particular skill and you don't know how you got it? Like you just certainly know how to do certain things and you never had any formal training or something like that. And if you did, is it possible that there was another, that your body is merely just a vessel? You know, like the life is actually a series of bodies for your soul to inhabit.
Sure.
How about that? And that's a kind of a mind blower right there.
I mean, I do think that to some extent. I toy around with lots of different, different ideas about what it is to be in the world and what it is to be brought in, and, if we're conscious or have a super consciousness or anything that brings us here, and if we are reincarnated. I tend to believe so. It's all just sort of conjecture, but
we don't really know. That's the problem. We never know. We will never know.
I like the theory that, we're here to turn over every rock and try out whatever is underneath it, so like, one lifetime you're a despot, and another one, you're a chorus girl. I don't know, like,
yeah. I don't, you've seen that Albert Brooks movie, the wonderful Albert Brooks movie, Defending Your Life.
Love that movie.
It's just a fantastic movie. I love that movie so much, and it makes so much sense to me.
Same. And
I also like that he doesn't bring religion into it.
Right.
It's just sort of like a bureaucracy, like an endless bureaucracy, and along the path to heaven. Maybe that's where this old woman will go. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. So another guy's been trying to get into her apartment. He's a contractor, played by R.G. Armstrong. He's been clearing out the buildings on the block, and it seems the whole block is going down to make way for new buildings, and he's making sure everybody's vacated. The way he talks, it sounds like he's going to turn this old woman out onto the street into the snow. If that's his plan, I'd ask Redford for a favor. He's like, I don't like having to throw a nice old lady out of her home. I'd be like, you know what, champ? I don't like having to ask my friend to end you. You want to shake his hand over here, Bobby? Ultimately, we find out that Redford is a vampire, or he's Mr. Death, because he has no reflection.
Right.
Yes, it's kind of a messed up ending, because he tricked her and everything. But he does have a great bit here, where he tells her, even as he takes her hand, and she's finally, I guess, surrendered to this, he says, no shock, no engulfment, no tearing asunder. What you feared would come like an explosion is like a whisper. What you thought was the end is the beginning. Mm-hmm. And they walk off together, I guess, into the great unknown. It's a great ending. What did you think of the episode?
I love it. I mean, I think it's quite beautiful, really. And I didn't think it was even mildly surprising that he was Death. I mean, of course, I knew, like, immediately.
Well, it sort of hits you, yeah.
I mean, it's sort of obvious to me, anything, if you're doing the Vonnegut thing and starting close to the end, then that the woman would immediately encounter the very thing she was afraid of. And it's also a short show, so you had to know he was Death coming in.
Yeah, that's right. And this is one where the running time is perfect for it.
Yeah, and I think
because it's just a little taste. It's just a little anecdote.
Right. Like if it went on longer, it would, belabor the point maybe. To be honest, I mean, I don't really, if I had a criticism of the episode, as much as I really enjoyed the performance of the work crew guy coming in, I actually thought he was wonderful. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure what the point of his only purpose in terms of moving the story forward was to not see Robert Redford.
Yeah.
That's the audience's first clue that he's not really there.
But again, we don't really need that, because all she has to do is look at the mirror and see that he doesn't have it.
Exactly. And I mean, you could argue that it's also to show us that she's so out of touch that she doesn't even know what's going on. And so
she doesn't really go outside. She gets all her food delivered to her.
She doesn't have anything to live for. Her neighbors are gone. She didn't even know. Everything is old and decrepit and all that stuff. Just like, and the building is a metaphor for her, right? He's like,
yeah.
This building is not safe anymore. You have to move out.
Yes.
I know you're attached to it, but you have to let go. So it's a lot of that stuff, and I get it. But
you have inanimate and animate entropy happening. You have the falling apart of everything, systems breaking down.
Yes, but I'm not certain his role there was crucial. I mean, it's nice, but
I think he might be there just to break it up, because maybe Serling didn't want it to be just a two-character piece.
Person scene. Yeah, I can see that too.
Just sort of shake it up, throw another person in there as confirmation of her kind of pathetic state at the end of her life, and Redford having no presence.
I like the moment when Redford stands up and he's like, "Am I really so bad?" with his arms outstretched.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of ladies would be like, "Oh no, baby, you good, good."
Not bad at all. Yeah.
if I understand the production order correctly, Nothing in the Dark was produced to be the final episode of the second season, rather than The Obsolete Man. So I have to assume that CBS cut its production order down by 2 episodes. The other episode was The Grave with Lee Marvin, another great one, personal favorite of mine. So if the show was not renewed, these episodes would have never been aired, and they would have been lost forever.
Shame that would have been.
All right, let's move on to another personal favorite of mine.
Yes.
One more pallbearer.
Yeah.
Paul Radin is a very angry man. He's a self-made man, I infer, because I monitor and observe the pride he has for his accomplishments and the plan he executes. I'm going to get really psychological on his character for this one.
Okay.
He has a very cool media center man cave set up in the sub-basement of his skyscraper. His skyscraper. I feel that he was planning this for years to get even with all those people who wronged him in his youth. What do you think?
I do think that was it's a Monte Cristo-esque level of commitment to revenge.
Yes. But elaborately produced. He is orchestrating an enormous practical joke, which admittedly is not very funny. It's a farce. It's morbid. He has this crew come in and install big screen TVs and speakers so he can simulate the end of the world.
What you have just looked at takes place 300 feet underground, beneath the basement of a New York City skyscraper. It's owned and lived in by one Paul Radin. Mr. Radin is rich, eccentric, and single-minded. How rich we can already perceive. How eccentric and single-minded we shall see in a moment. Because all of you have just entered the Twilight Zone.
He invites his high school teacher, his minister, and his superior officer in the army. And these were people from his past who, it seems, went out of their way to humiliate him in some way. And I say they went out of their way because they did, and from his perspective, which I can understand, they tried to destroy him.
Yeah.
And this is what I would call the greatest generation at work right here. Radin, okay, these are the examples. He cheated on a test and was humiliated in front of his class by what I can only presume is a terrible teacher, and her ideas of pity, respect, and trust need to be seriously rethought. He, through his action or inaction, caused the woman to commit suicide, and a minister called him on it. We don't get any details about the story. I wonder what happened, unless he was on the phone with this woman night and day, urging her to commit suicide like some kind of demonic Mary Worth. I do believe people should take responsibility for their actions, good or bad. Next up is the Colonel, another terribly bitter and angry man. He asserts that Radin nearly got his battalion killed during the war when he refused a direct order to take a hill or something. Sounds like Paths of Glory, the Stanley Kubrick film. This is war. I know nothing of killing anonymous strangers on a battlefield, but the stinger is that the Colonel would have had Radin killed for his inactions. So I'm thinking this is a loving and giving person. I'm being sarcastic. So back to the apocalypse scenario. He's going to give these horrible people one chance to absolve themselves of sins in his eyes because of his respected, wealthy position in the world. He gets advanced knowledge. He lays them this horse hockey story about major goings on. He knows when the next Global Citizens Free concert will occur or something. And he tells the assembled people that he happens to know World War III is about to start. And if they apologize, they get to live with him down there, which is just sounds wonderful. He's got like the sound effects tape on a loop, and he starts playing it. They, of course, freak out, but they would rather die with their loved ones than with him. Now let's talk a little bit about Radin here. What do you think of the man?
I'd like to say, since you've chosen to take the perspective of Radin in your summary, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the devil's advocate and take everybody else's perspective. And I say this with no love lost whatsoever for any like ministers or or military people. I have a little more sensitivity for the teacher, but I'm going to still take their points of view and just say that from their perspective, this is a person of low character. With the teacher, you know, she's saying cheating is pretty much as bad as it gets. And blaming it on another innocent student, which is what he tried to do, is even worse.
Well, I would have to say in 2017, things are a lot more worse than that, you know.
But I still think cheating is a pretty awful thing. From my perspective as a teacher, I think cheating is lame. I mean, it just really speaks to an unwillingness to do the work and a willingness to take the easy way out.
I think I might have cheated on a test once.
I'm not saying I've never, I mean, I don't believe I've ever cheated on a test, but I'm not even saying I would have ever been above it my whole life. But I can see that that's a pretty serious thing, and that as a teacher, you would want to instill in a kid immediately at a young age, like, this is absolutely never acceptable. I can elaborate on that further, but moving on to the minister, yeah, that was a weird storyline because they don't tell you anything. That I inferred that he had gotten this girl pregnant or something.
Yeah, some write-ups say that, yeah.
Yeah, that she had killed herself because he had refused to, make good or marry her or help her or whatever, and that her life was essentially ruined. And so she... Well,
yeah, you got a couple of keywords there. The teacher says something about a frightened young woman who's crying or something like that.
Right. And then with the other guy, I really have very little compassion for the military guy who wants to have him shot for being unwilling to follow orders. I mean, court-martial the guy by all means. But, the take home with all of them, though, is just that whether or not you feel that he was justified in his anger or sense of outrage or even his actions in any of these situations, he just doesn't seem willing to take responsibility at all for his actions in the world.
Well, the thing... Well, there's the old saying. You ever heard the old saying, the best revenge is living well?
Yes.
This guy's a self-made man. That's why I say, if he was a self-made man, then he went, I don't know, he turned his life around or something, and he became a success. And now he's like incredibly powerful, incredibly wealthy, and he wants to really stick it to them because, it's like if someone, told you that you were like a failure and a loser and you would never amount to anything, and then you do, you want to meet up with that person. You might have a few things to say to that person.
For sure. But I also think, if you're a person that's motivated to do well in the world because people thought ill of you, you're never going to be satisfied or happy with the successes that you reap.
Well, he's obviously not happy. He's a miserable person.
Right. Like, because you're always focused on what they're thinking instead of your own experiences. He's all alone in the world. He's down in this bunker with these 3 people he hasn't seen in God knows how long, but where are the people in his life today? Nowhere.
And, there's also another interesting point that he has to create a scenario where he thinks they might be able to apologize to him and beg for their lives, rather than actually earn that apology. This is a fake apology, really, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like, oh, no, please, we don't want to die. We don't want to go out there. Yes, we're sorry. We're sorry we treated you so badly. No. You could explain it to these people, how it messed with you, because it does mess with people growing up. And I would say, like I told you, I thought I think I cheated on a test, maybe like in the 7th grade. Mm-hmm. But what it was, it was a whole group of kids, us underachievers. I got really bad grades. Somebody found a photocopy of a test that was going to be given to us in a couple of days. So somebody copied it up and we looked at it or something. I don't think I copied it up, but I did try to commit to memory as many answers as I could because I didn't want to be caught with anything physical, Mm-hmm. But when the cheating was discovered by the teacher, and it was, I wasn't really part of it, but the teacher did not bring the people up to the front of class and humiliate them. No. That's what I see as sadistic. That's incredibly sadistic to do that. Instead, the teacher just did a new test. She whipped out a new test.
Well, that's correct and appropriate. I mean, I'm no stranger, though, to that old style of teaching where they would make a spectacle of a student that they didn't like their behavior or do these blatantly sadistic things. I mean, I did see a lot of that growing up in schools and just thought it was horrible. And
some of your older teachers would probably be like that. The younger ones, not so much.
I think it bears mentioning that the acting in this episode is really good because you actually do feel a degree of compassion for him as he's listening to, for example, the teacher talk about her position and him saying...
Yeah, I love how they're fighting with him. They're fighting with him about this, and he is absolutely surprised. He's stunned. He says he can't believe these people still have this attitude about it. They hate him,
Right. He's like, how could you just not be willing to say... And all he really wants is this apology, but it is kind of sad that he's willing to extract it in this manner instead of just going to them, as you said, and saying, all those years ago when this happened, it was really traumatizing for me. And, if you could tell me today that you're sorry that you humiliated me, It would mean a lot to me.
Right.
That would have a very different impact. But then again, there'd be no story.
Well, I'm sorry to harp on about it, but I can't believe these people have loved ones. I mean, they're an incredibly judgmental group of assholes. I hate them. I hate them. They start lecturing him about his callous disregard, his coldness, never mind the fact that if I had people like this in my life growing up, I'd turn into a monster too. I mean...
come on. None of it was all that bad. I think they're all kind of lame, him and them included. I don't actually love this episode because to me, it's just kind of like a really contrived... You know what it is? It's a very puerile adolescent fantasy brought to...
Yeah, kind of. But I also do think that Serling is probably trying to set up some kind of a paradox here, an emotional paradox, where you have. I guess he's just trying to show that people are just stubborn on both sides. Maybe
that's it. Well,
they demand to be let go to die.
Yeah, but it's crazy. But I don't blame them because it's like, do you really want to be one of 3 people that are living? And you don't even like this guy.
Yeah, you're stuck with him forever.
Living in this like weird.
And you owe your life to him too.
Yeah, with this guy who's a jerk who tried to make me apologize and all this other. It's just, I don't really want to do that. I would just want to die. If I knew my loved ones were all going to be dead anyway, I'd be like, I don't really want to live with you down here. I'm just going to go die now. Yeah.
So this is when Raiden snaps. He can't believe these people won't even apologize. They don't even have to meet it, really. I mean, but they refuse, which I guess says something for their character. And he lets them go. They leave, and he goes nuts. And this is when we go a little surreal here. He takes the elevator up to the ground floor of his building and sees nothing but devastation for miles. The apocalypse did happen, but it happened only in his mind. The world he looks at is what has happened to his mind. So there is some symbolism there, or maybe a visual metaphor going on. It's become a fragmented schizophrenic mess. So you said before you didn't. This isn't a favorite. What are your thoughts?
Well, I feel like, first of all, to say that it speaks to their character that they wouldn't apologize. I think they shouldn't apologize. I don't think they owe that guy anything, and I think that I would not apologize to someone who tried to extract an apology from me. Especially not in the wake of this weird event. He's trying to keep me in his bunker, and away from my family in this moment of crisis.
Well, let's get personal for a second. Now you and I are two emotionally we're sensitive people. We're aware when people are feeling a certain thing, and we might even be aware that we might have caused that feeling. So what if people like you and me were in that bunker or in that basement, and we were told that we had done something to somebody a long time ago? Knowing me with my memory, I can't barely remember anything, last week, let alone 30 years ago. But if they told you or I, you really messed with me and I want you to apologize. I don't know, the person I am now is a different person than what I was 30 years ago. So I'd be like, I might actually say, if it didn't matter to me that I had to continue feeling hostility for this person, I'd be like, I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I'm sorry that you felt that way. I would like to rectify.
I mean, there's a part of me that would probably just say, look, man, it obviously means a lot to you. And if this has had this kind of impact on you, I am sorry. I could have done something differently.
Right.
But, but I also think that he wanted to be absolved of his own guilt in those circumstances. And I think that he bears some responsibility. I mean, did he ever go and apologize to the family of the girl that killed herself, or to the kid that he blamed for his cheating?
Yeah.
Or to the other people that died on the battlefield, that he was responsible for their death indirectly?
Right, but I think in the human condition, we have to be better than others. We have to be better than ourselves. We have to be better than others. I
agree with you. And as I said, I think if it were me, I would be a bigger person than those 3 people sitting there. But I also think that his obsession, is...
They didn't even seem like humans to me. That's why I don't really like those people, because they seemed like robots that were programmed to feel a specific emotion and never to deviate, never to correct, never to maybe...
I thought particularly the teacher showed a degree of emotional depth. Actually, even the minister.
She did, but
the minister a little bit, like there, when
I hate when she says that pity has to be earned or something like that. I don't like that.
Agree. That's terrible, a terrible sentiment, and that he wasn't worthy of it. It's a horrible sentiment.
Yeah.
And so she just seemed like, I actually thought her character was really interesting because it was a very real character to me, like someone who is steeped in a certain value system and has really clung to that. It almost reminded me of like a nun or something, who really has a very strong black and white idea of what is good and what is bad.
I guess,
Have a lot of relativistic understanding of the world, like, and its gradations, So can't say, well, at that time, you appeared to me as a child of low character, and I wanted to make an impact on you. So I held you as an example when, obviously that was damaging to you, and I shouldn't have done that. But at the time, it seemed like the best way to approach it. So yeah, of course, she doesn't have that degree of self-awareness, but she was an interesting character because she's not totally wrong. Like some of the things that she said were kind of interesting and smart, but then she would say something like that and you'd think, oh my God, that's just cold. How could you ever think a little kid is not worthy of pity or compassion?
Yeah, I know. It's very, like I said, it's kind of like literally old school.
Yeah.
And because these are not the teachers that I'm used to seeing. I mean, like Regan's teachers, particularly like, I don't know, maybe her kindergarten through third grade teachers were incredibly wonderful, understanding, sensitive people who really, bust their asses to help these kids. It's about helping kids.
I have this conversation pretty often with a friend of mine who grew up around the same time that I did and the same time that you did. And we talk about how we went to public school here in Rhode Island and how the teachers we were exposed to, especially in grade school and elementary school, were among the last generation of teachers who were like really long career teachers.
Yeah.
That came into that profession during a time when really the only available vocations for women other than being a wife were being a nurse, being a secretary, or being a teacher. You had to look forward and see what sort of career you were going to have to be able to have security and support yourself and to make sure that, you were taken care of.
Yeah.
And these were the three paths available to women in those situations. But that doesn't mean that the women that became teachers at that time did it out of a passion for education or a love for children. In fact, quite the opposite many times. And I think a lot of them, because they were more or less forced into this vocation, or at least they thought they were, that they actually probably actively resented the children that they taught. And so they were
yes.
punitive, as a result of that. And after doing it for, say, if you had to earn your pension, you had to do that job for 25 years or something. By the time we got around, we were burnt out and had no use for little kids anymore.
Well, that was part, that's probably part of that generational war, the same kind of war that went on between parents and their children. Teachers are kind of like surrogate parents. That's how we view them. Well, that's how the school system views them. I try not to.
But that's why they were all old ladies when I was in school. And they
yeah. We had a horrible old man who was a math teacher. He was terrible. He was cruel.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we don't have teachers like they have these days, which are, a lot younger. They're a lot closer in years to those kids, so they can kind of maybe identify, or maybe it's part of the climate. The culture has changed because technology has brought us closer together, and my kid is listening to Pearl Jam.
Right.
So
right.
I'm like, yeah.
Generation gap is less obvious and less vast. And also I think there's just 1,000,001, as much as we have employment issues, we also have 1,000,001 career options now. We have a lot of things we can be. So when people choose to become a teacher, they generally have an interest in either educating or being around kids or both.
Yeah. What they're doing
with a certain passion for it, or at least they look favorably on it and don't think of it as a thing that they're forced to do.
Yes, absolutely. I agree completely with you. But I do love this episode. I absolutely love it. It's one of my personal favorites. And it sparkles throughout with like incredible ideas and paranoia and the karmic absolution, because I think Serling as a writer never tells us in explicit terms who the bad guy is. He never tells us. He seems oddly sympathetic, never mind me, but he seems oddly sympathetic toward Raiden, and his director, Lamont Johnson, who also directed the previous episode, Nothing in the Dark, photographs his guests like birds of prey. I mean, do you notice the angles, the camera angles? Yeah. So it makes the viewer a little bit uncomfortable or off balance watching the episode unfold. For a piece dominated by one set, by one room, it's really effective for me.
Well, yeah, I felt very claustrophobic throughout the episode because of the setting. Mm-hmm. Like, I was very acutely aware of them being far beneath the earth. Even though you're only in this room and it could be anywhere, you know, it was effective in that regard. I think that's a testament to the direction.
All right. Thanks so much for doing this.
Sure.
Next time, I will be discussing Dead Man's Shoes and The Hunt with Scott Becker on That Twilighty Show About That Zone. I want to thank my guest, Steve Kerrigan. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave.
Do me a favor, read up on your eminent domain rules and the unlawful eviction of tenants as a result of demolition and reconstruction. You actually have rights, and you can be compensated for any reasonable distress. Call Cellino and Barnes, injury attorneys.
Cellino and Barnes, injury attorneys, 800-888-8888.
Don't wait, call 8.
Yeah, if death doesn't get you first.
I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. And in short, I was afraid. Good night.
Good night.